This is an ultimate global podcast. Hello, and welcome to our Daily Dose podcast, covering all about day-to-day global affairs. You're listening to Saurabh Kora and George Mavros from Sydney.
Hello, and a very good evening to everyone who is joining us from Sydney and around the world. And in today's special Monday Daily Dose podcast, we are talking about this important issue of women's safety, which is a growing concern in South Asia. And this episode is in collaboration with Opportunities Australia, which is providing special mentorship programs to all the people who are either unemployed or don't have enough opportunities. And joining us today, along with George, is the founder of Opportunities Australia, Kumar Arjha, to talk about this important issue of women's safety. Now, just sharing these key numbers with you before we start, we have this global gender gap report of 2021, which shows you the amount of gender gap you have between males and females in different countries. And it gives you the report of 156 countries, out of which the South Asian countries are ranking in the worst possible ranking you can see. So India ranks 140, Pakistan ranks 153, Bangladesh is doing a good job by ranking 65, Afghanistan ranks at the bottom with 156, and this really tells you the entire story of how women's safety is a growing concern in that particular region. So, firstly, I would like to welcome Kumar to today's podcast and would love to know your initial comments on this, Kumar.
Thank you, Saurabh. What else to say but to say that I do understand, I do acknowledge the mess that has been created around the world, and especially around the Indian subcontinental countries. So it's the traditional culture that we have been following in those countries. And, rightly so, you talk about Afghanistan. We all know what happens there. There's almost next to none is the women's rights in those countries. So, time for things to change. Just the way Taliban has been treating women, versus how those Afghani people get to wear clothes and get to interact out in developed countries. There's no comparison whatsoever. People wearing hijab and all, and versus when they interact out here, there's no hijab, and the clothing are beautiful. So not even just pure black stuff. So it's a sad thing, look forward to talking in detail.
Yep. And if you look at, what happened back in 2012 in Delhi, we all know about the Nirbhaya incident, in which the woman was tortured in the middle of the road and nobody did anything. The public kept on watching what was happening. And the same has happened 1 year back, and even this year in India, also in Pakistan, we heard about same kind of things happening in Islamabad. So, what's really happening, George? Is there something wrong with the mindset, or what do you think should be improved here? Because it has been going on for years and years with different kind of legislations coming into the picture, but still we don't see these cases coming down anytime sooner.
I think, sadly, you can't legislate culture and belief. In this country, Australia, the land of the free, and America, the land of the free, and equal rights, and blah, blah, blah. It's only in the last few years, within the last few years, there was a police commissioner or a police authority in Victoria, when talking about a woman being raped, who said that women need to know they can't go out on their own of a night and they have to think about being dressed. That's a horrendous statement. What he should have said is, men have got to understand that just because a woman's on her own, she should be respected. No matter how you're dressed, you should be respected. And so what you've got in a lot of the Asian cultures is that the woman still has not been elevated to an equal position. And there's a lot of talk about it, and there is movement. There is movement. But just like we in Australia or America or England or whatever, there was a movement, and there's still a lot of work to be done. I think you can have all sorts of things ruled in any country in Asia, Middle East, wherever you want to talk about. But if the society doesn't really get a hold of it, and men don't start to understand that we are the problem. I'm not saying necessarily Kamar or you or me, but men universally have to understand that it is men that are the problem that's causing. You don't hear very many women going out and attacking men. You don't hear very many women going out and attacking women. It's got to come from the male side of it, and we've got to start to get this understanding that what you've grown up with is not right. If you remember, you and I were talking at the fall of the Afghanistan government and the Taliban, and I said to you, we'll know within a month what's going to happen there. We've already seen it. It's going to be different this time, except it's not. And it was only, last week we were talking about the TV interview where one of the leaders of the Taliban said, we will respect them, but you've got to go back to Islam. And so, no, they can't be doing all of those things. They shouldn't be here. That was...
Yeah, absolutely true. And I was also listening to one Taliban spokesman. And if I just quote him directly, you will understand the kind of mentality these people have in these countries. So I'm not generalizing it for the entire region, but specifically for Afghanistan and the kind of power or the government, the new government which has formed. It will tell you the mindset of that Taliban said, a woman can't be a minister. It is like you put something on her neck that she can't carry. It is not necessary for a woman to be in the cabinet. They should just give birth, and women protesters can't represent all women in Afghanistan. Now, this statement just tells you that the kind of stereotyping that you have already created for women, when you start saying that women are just created to giving births and they're just there for, tasks which are related to your house, and they cannot represent the entire woman, they cannot lead the country. I think that's kind of a backward thinking which we are going towards the 1996 Taliban which we were talking about, isn't it, Kumar?
Absolutely. The thinking is just too backward and too inhumane, and big time for a change here. The world has moved, but you cannot expect humanity out of inhumane people. They do not understand all that. So the only way was America policing the country and keeping the people safe. If the rest of the world could have taken more people, but not many people want to leave the country. This is where they grew up, and this is where the roots are, all the culture. If they come to the the likes of, say, Australia, America, etc., they will have to learn other language and culture. So that means that they'll have to quit the culture that they grew up with. They might be following a little bit of that, but they will have to speak English. And what if they are starting later in their life, and they might not be speaking English up until the age of 40 or so, and it would become very difficult. So they would neither belong to Afghanistan nor they would belong to Australia, like in some ways. So it's a painful situation. And speaking of that, we have been interacting with some of the people who have arrived in Australia. And actually, on that note, we are also gearing up towards teaching them English and trying to get them some jobs as well. So yeah, we are working on that. Just prepared our team for English this weekend. But anyway, it's a very painful situation. The whole system has to change. Afghanistan is an exceptional country, not just the way it's run. No one could touch that pretty much. If America has quit, who else is going to touch Afghanistan? No one. But besides that, we could talk about countries like, say, India, maybe Pakistan, Bangladesh, where things could be a bit better. India is the biggest democracy. Things have been progressing. Gone are the days when women didn't have any rights. Women were just born to say, like Saurabh was saying, to produce babies, look after them, and that was pretty much it. Women were never considered to be, working. Could become a doctor or an engineer, that was never heard of. So now, women can do. Women can go to space. Women can become doctors and engineers and scientists. This is amazing. So just the way they are going, they have to keep on motivating one another, and perhaps push things towards the government as well. Women have to be more motivated, go towards, the main jobs, like, the C-level jobs, try for some of the high roles out there, biggest multinational companies, and then after go to the parliament. That's the big job. That's the highest job for me. Is go to the parliament, revive all the rules which are existing. The old rules. You've got to change that. And when you're going to clean things up from top, that's when you see the change. So I would love for Indian women. And on that note, we have Indian women. I have been away from India for a long time, and I haven't been keeping tab of like what is happening very much out there in India. But I know that there aren't enough MPs out there in comparison to the men, the male MPs. So still India and subcontinent will have a long way to go. But as long as people are united and people are motivated, I think they're gonna go a long way. Women.
And it's very less. The participation is still around 20% or even less than that in the parliament. I don't have the exact figures, but I have been listening to those figures coming in the last couple of years, that it has been very less in comparison to that. If you just look at the number of complaints which are still coming every year, it still says that in India alone, there has been a 46% rise in complaints regarding crimes against women. And violence is something which is still reported, and 1 in 3 women, they don't feel safe in top metropolitans. If you talk about top metropolitans in India, and I guess same will be the situation in Pakistan and other South Asian countries as well. In fact, some of the children are now also being taught about good touch and bad touch. What's the importance of that? Because we saw a rise in cases against small children. How inhuman people can be. This is the best example for you. If a 4-year-old girl or a 5-year-old girl is being tortured, that is something which is highly inhuman and which should be really looked at carefully, isn't it, George?
Yeah, I just want to make a point to you. You're saying that the complaints have risen by 40 or something percent. In some ways, this is actually a good sign, not a bad sign. And the reason I say that to you is that it doesn't necessarily mean that the incidence has increased to that degree. What it means is that women are now prepared to speak out. And I'll give you an example. There's been a dramatic increase in the number of complaints about sex trafficking and underage behaviour, inappropriate behaviour towards underage people, and inappropriate behaviour towards women that are in the movies. That has dramatically increased in the last 2 years. Harvey Weinberg, for one. Prince Andrew's got a few questions to answer at the other. Now, it's not that the incidence has increased, but finally we're starting to get women game enough and seeing enough support that they're prepared to complain about it more. So when I was a child, or even in my 20s, right, we didn't talk about these things. Oh, We don't, you can't go and report it. Because in India, I've spoken to some female uni students over the last couple of years, and they're saying your family would say to you, you can't report that. You will bring shame on the family. Now we're at least getting that shift, Kumar, where women are being supported to make that. So when I say that it could be a good sign, not a bad sign, I'm not condoning it. Don't anybody get me wrong. What I'm saying is, in Australia, the number of rapes that are being reported now compared to what they used to be is a much higher level. It doesn't necessarily mean that the number of rapes have gone up. It means that women are being given the voice, and we're actually doing something about it. So that's a start. And the other side of it is society and government and authority has to make women feel that if they do go through this harassment, this embarrassment, this whatever it is that they feel that they're going to go through by reporting, that it's actually worthwhile. And so the more that we can support women and encourage women, look at the Me Too movement, Kumar. It started in America with one or two people making a complaint, and then somebody said, "Me too, me too, me too," and it just went global. It started popping up all over the place, which was great. Now those incidences, Sarab, they didn't happen this year. But ladies and women started to feel like I can actually say something now, and that's a good thing to me.
Even the thing is now men are supporting them, like
Yes.
men used to be just, thinking about men maybe like, I mean, it's a general statement I'm making, but, like, why did women get so powerless, right? There must be reasons for that, and why are all the males, out there who are MPs and who are the CEOs and all, and why didn't women get there, So of course, the reason that, it was male-dominated society, different countries, etc. So now male are supporting that because enough is enough. So, I mean, like people like yourselves, you're supporting, you're vouching for them, and this is what's making women stronger. And now women can become prime ministers of different countries. Look at Jacinta Ardern or Sana Mirza, etc. I mean, they are fantastic leaders. I mean, they beat several men out there in the world. Anytime Jacinta Ardern, gives a live speech, I mean, like Australian people say, bravo, we love you. We love you for who you are. We love you for what you do. So it's amazing, women are as good as men. So, I mean, finally that men are opening up and men are, opening doors and, endorsing them, etc. And things are getting normalized. So, that's what I would say, like, keep doing what we are doing, and more women leaders will arise, and, more and more women will feel empowered so they can open up to any bullying or, any issues. And besides that, they could run for, offices like, just state election to any other. I mean, it's time to support them.
And in fact, I was listening to Jacinda Ardern a few days back when she was saying that some of men or the male leaders always question that strong leadership cannot be complemented with empathy and compassion, which she has shown in the last 4 years. Her main value proposition has been that she has shown how empathetic and compassionate you can be as a leader of a country, but still take those strong decisions if you have to take them. And that is how she has differentiated from others. But what really is of my concern is that in these countries, the topic that was chosen, the South Asian countries, some of them, including India, they have done incredibly well after they got independent in 1947. India has in fact gone to Mars. India has gone to Moon. India has done so well in technology, in the world of technology. We see some of those CEOs sitting at the top companies, including Sundar Pichai, and all those global CEOs are Indians. They are doing that incredibly well in so many areas. But still, after 70 years of independence, we are talking about this women's safety. what does a woman want at the end of the day living in a country? They just want right to live, right to live in a world where they can say that I'm safe enough. And if a woman is going out on the street and she's not feeling safe, or I have heard in my family, if you are going out after 9 p.m., come before 9 p.m. because you are not safe. I've heard this in my family, and this is not the story of my family, but this is the story of a lot of families, thousands and thousands of families in South Asia who still feel that after 9 p.m., if their wife or their daughter is not back home, they're worried because they feel that, what might happen to my daughter, what might happen to my wife if he's not back before 8 p.m. to the house. And, this is still the reality, George, just for your information, because Kumar is already from the same country. But, this is the thing that we still have. And Sydney, at the moment, the location we're talking from, is still at a better situation than those countries are.
Yeah, look, I was over in Hong Kong and China about 2 or 3 years ago, and we with my agent in Hong Kong, we went into China to do some business there. And whenever I go to other countries, I always try to have a bit of a talk to the locals, be it in the motel, the waitress, the shopkeepers, or whatever. And one of the interesting things that I found was 5 years earlier, when I'd been into China, the attitude of the women to their own personal wealth had changed in that 5 years. There was a stronger identification of who they are and that they do have rights. And so I think it's like anything. You want the change and you want it to happen fast, but it takes a long time to get things to move. We're not dealing with speedboats. We're dealing with aircraft carriers. They've got to come around slowly. And I think the fact that your topic is women's safety is a growing concern in Asia, in South Asia, is a good topic, because it's not necessarily that it's getting worse, but it is being more thought about. And as Kumar said, we have to make a change. The men have to make a change. Society has to make a change. And it's just, you just got to keep at it and keep at it. And your efforts, Kumar, in teaching women English and showing them, that starts to infiltrate back. And other women in that country start to find out that we can do this. There are opportunities. Why should it only be an opportunity in Australia? Why can't we make this happen in our own country? And so it filters back. But again, let me say that even though you're talking about South Asia, don't think that Australia's got it perfectly right yet, or America, or England, or New Zealand. We might be further down the track, but men in any Western country should not think that women have got anywhere near equality yet. There's a long way to go.
Yeah. There is now a question for Kumar. Kumar has been similar to me. He has lived in both the countries. He's lived in India. He's also lived in Australia. So women's safety, as we have discussed, is still a major concern, Kumar. What, according to you, will bring that cultural change? As George was just saying, that there might be a cultural change we require.
Sorry, I could not hear the question. There's a bit of a disturbance in the line. Could you please repeat? Let's see.
So I'm talking about the cultural change.
Yeah.
So George just talked about this fact that change in the society can only happen when there is a cultural shift that things happen. Can you hear us, Kumar?
Yeah, I can hear you. Cultural change, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
I think there is.
Maybe step back a little bit from the mic, Sarab. There seems to be a lot of distortion.
Okay.
Yeah, so we can hear you. So change in culture, yes, Saurabh. So Yeah,
So,
and
what is the change in culture? How do you think that change in culture can take place in South Asian countries? That was my main question. Yeah. Over to you.
change in culture, like to me, like how, if I'm understanding the question right, like my culture changed. Like I was an Indian and now I'm an Australian, right? So there's a huge difference in the culture. I mean, how I saw the women out there, like women have to wear sari, we call it pallu, sari over their head, just to show respect. And then after, they got to cover their faces as well, when they are, based on who they are seeing, etc. When it comes to Muslim women, like some majority of time they cover their whole faces, right? When they're out and about. Versus those women when they come over here, as I was talking to you earlier, that like Afghani women, those who are wearing the full burqa, black ones. When they come up here, there's freedom. They don't need to wear those things anymore. They can talk to people. They can go to schools. I mean, seriously. Education is not allowed out in those countries. Versus, here, education is allowed. Like revealing their hair and faces and all. This is like such a freedom. I mean, I can imagine the joy, like for those people, like it's like coming out of a slavery. It is pretty much slavery, whether it's like Hindu people or the Muslim people, especially, people from Afghanistan, etc. I mean, that's huge. Um, even for even for an Indian Hindu boy, like myself, when as I was growing up, the things were rather traditional. It's, boy, don't go out, late at night. You're not to go to a pub or something. You're not to eat beef. You're not to eat pork, and like you're not to. I mean, there's so many not tos versus, okay, go ahead, enjoy your life, and go try. And what could go wrong, like cultures like that. So there is a huge difference between the culture things. I mean, I grew up in a middle class family where there were so many not to's. It's like, okay, you're not to come home late at night. I mean, yeah. Um, Alcohol is not allowed, and so many other things, and traditional things. I mean, like beef, you can't eat that, all that. I mean, so huge things. So many things we get to learn. So much freedom we get to have. We talk logic. We don't talk tradition. We don't talk superstitious things. And like, I mean, there's a huge difference. So after living in Australia for almost 2 decades, all those barriers are gone for me. And I believe all the barriers are gone for the women also, those who have come to these cultures, adopted Australian culture, or gone to any Western countries, any developed countries. I think that's a huge shift in thinking, and it really opens your mind. And I'm so glad to call Australia home now, and surround myself with many other open-minded people. I also have mentors, though I'm mentor at UNSW and some other places, but I also have mentors, some older people, engineers, etc. And I have been learning lots of things, like, I mean, me, upgrading myself, learning different things, I also learn. I have been learning every day. I have not stopped learning. So this is how you shift. And yeah, no, a lot of thinking has moved. And I mean, our morning walks, I do morning walks with Saurabh, as often as I could, on a weekly basis, and we talk about a lot of things. So yeah, it's amazing to come to a developed country and learn a lot of cultures. It's not just Australian culture. I mean, Australia people from different parts of the world, they come up here and they love to call Australia home. So I got to make friends from all over the world, and people talk about different things, and it's amazing to befriend them and learn a lot of things. Versus what I could learn in India, which is kind of a monoculture. Not many people. India itself is 1 billion plus population, and and not having great things to offer based on those kind of culture. We don't get to see a lot of people from overseas wanting to make Australia home, make India home. So yeah, it's kind of monoculture out there. So huge difference. I hope I have answered the question.
Yep, that was a very detailed answer. But I was also thinking in my mind that in addition to culture, what can be the changes done at the bureaucratic level? I guess there is some disturbance when Kumar signs in with the mobile, because of which there might be some disturbance. So I'll mute you for a while, Kumar. Don't feel it as a disrespect. I really respect you a lot. Uh, at the bureaucratic level, I think that there can be some changes which can be done by those political leaders, uh, and also the way they look at women. Sometimes we see that these bureaucratic leaders sitting at top positions in these countries are themselves not respecting women, are themselves giving statements. So if you look at leaders which are themselves giving those statements, how will the law and order be working with that kind of bureaucracy to impose a law which is for the safety of women? Obviously, they will find out some sort of loopholes in the system, and the people or the criminals who are you know indulging themselves in any kind of crimes, they will always have contacts in the bureaucracy to get rid of these kind of horrendous crimes, isn't it, George?
Yeah, look, there's a certain part of this where you've got to have a generational change, and it's got to work its way through. So if all the people that in the 65 and 75-year age bracket grew up with this culture, you've got to wait for the generation and the next generation and the next generation to slowly move up, and the others move on, and away we go. It was very interesting that Kamal was making the point about educating the people that come out here, and him learning being educated in different cultures and different approaches. I'm not talking about education as in the 3 times table and all of that. When you were talking about that, Kumar, it reminded me as a young child. I'm 65, and I was probably about 14 or 15, and my background is Greek heritage. And we were sitting in a lounge room of my uncle, well, actually my godfather and my godmother. We were there, and there was a bit of a hoo-ha going on about what the young girls, my sisters were probably then 18, 19, and the teenagers were at that 18, 19 mark. And the parents and the grandma, my nana, they were horrified at some of the goings on that was going on with these young people and all of that. It didn't affect me because I wasn't old enough to be going out yet. My cousin George, who had not been in the country for that long, and he'd come over from Greece. And he said to my relatives, the older ones, he said, "Your problem is you've been in Australia for 40 years. Greece has changed. Greece has grown up. Greece is modern. Greece is educated. And he started to talk about all these things. And what had happened was, if you could imagine, this generation, Sarab, had come to Australia, and they still had the beliefs of when they left their homeland 30 years, 40 years earlier, right? And what George was saying, he brought the education. And as the new Greek generation came in, it educated the local Greeks that were still living down here. Now, what Kumar was saying just made me think about that, Kumar, and maybe what we've got to see now is more Asian ladies and women being educated outside of the country and going back into the country to modernise. So it's the reverse. Instead of to go back to say, listen, this isn't the way it goes. We've got to lift our game. We've got to do this. And so I think there's a mixture, Sarah. And a lot of those people that you say are being disrespectful and all that, and I certainly would agree with you, but they've grown up. If they're 60, 70, 80 years of age now, that's what they grew up with. It's very hard to get them to change. So you've got to work on your age, the 20s and the 30-year-olds. That's where we've got a chance of re-educating.
I hope everything is sorted out, Kumar.
Just testing if I have just rebooted my computer. Is it better? By the way, is there no disturbance in the?
There is no
Yeah,
disturbance.
I think that's sounding pretty good. I was getting worried before because I thought we were going to get to the stage where the Aussie was going to have to translate from what Sarab was saying to you. That could have been fun.
I'm very glad it worked out. Okay,
Anyways,
so
Kumar, any final comments from your side before we end today's podcast?
well, we have to keep on progressing, and as I was saying earlier, that men will have to open the doors, because sadly a lot of men, control freak men, they are holding all these doors. They cannot hold it for too long. Unfortunately, they cannot hold it for too long. They
Yep.
better open it now. They better open it sooner than later,
Yep.
before it's too late. Open with grace rather than, them just taking over, them saying, good. The whole communities, they just understand who's good, who's not, what's the point of taking the seat on the table if you don't deserve it?
Yep.
Yeah. So whether it's women or people of color, whoever, let's talk about women. Plenty of deserving women out there, from color too, from like a background of color or any other. Those deserving. And on that note, I would like to give an example here is, countries like Singapore, where all successful people, like, the best doctor in town would become the health minister. It's like no discrepancies in anything. You are the best in your profession. You go and hold the position, in that, and you have all the ideas, how to run that portfolio. And then there would be some people, they would have some of the top advisors as well who would do the admin work for you. But you are the brand, versus people who shuffle around in the ministries and they have no idea, what to do. And they fail once, they fail twice, and this is what happens in a lot of governments. So I think deserving people should get a chance, and we will have a much better society anywhere, including here in Australia, but definitely out there in Indian subcontinental countries. So, and I think it's high time now for those things to happen. So let's see how things go. But Indian women have been very progressive. Indian women have been, like working really hard, no matter where they come from. And I see these beautiful stories from some of the poor people, like who might be working as a laborer, but like they take really pride into sending their daughters into even at least government schools or so. And government schools are okay, and if they are really hardworking, they can prepare for. I mean. Amazing stories come out, like some people become IAS or IPS, so Indian Administrative Service. These are some of the topmost ranking roles that people can qualify for, and like then they become superintendent of police or deputy superintendent of police, or they become forest officers. Some very senior positions. And people can come from poor families or so. So like as long as people are working hard, they get there. And and nobody has got the power to really stop them. So I would say, just keep doing what they are doing, and I would, in time, whatever I could do, would keep on opening doors. I am also trying to get into the politics, at a later stage, and if I ever get in and climb the ladders, my aim is to clean a lot of these things, and especially making legislations for women that would really open up doors for them and empower them, because there are so many hardworking women out there who need a seat on the table, to make the societies and countries better.
Yep, I agree.
Sure.
Yeah.
And that's what, people like Indra Nui, if you know, CEO of PepsiCo, and many more CEOs in India, outside India, have shown that if they are given the chance, if they are educated, if they are given a chance to go out and become independent, what change they can make to the society. And, I just remember the statement last year after Kamala Harris became the vice president of United States. She said that I am not the last woman who is going to become the vice president. and she has kind of become the inspiration of so many women in United States, that she's not the last person to become, she's not the last woman to become, but she's just the first one. And a lot of women are going to follow her footsteps and become inspired by her journey.
And it's not just America, it's around the world.
Yes.
Absolutely. So I was just giving you an example for that. Yeah.
Yes.
Anyways, I think this discussion can go on for a couple of hours, but we will end this discussion for now. And I hope that we were able to share some key insights with our audience in this podcast. If you have got any other, suggestions or feedback for any topic that you think we should be discussing about, or if you also want to become a part of this, feel free to let us know through LinkedIn or Instagram through our pages, or feel free to contact me or George personally. We would be happy to, inculcate those ideas into our podcast in the future. Thank you so much to everyone, and thank you so much to Kumar and George for joining us today.